This
and
conference will
heme dip
now be
test,
recorded.
urine bile pigment is present, and heme dip test is positive. I'll read the case again. Case 5. A 32-year-old presented with 4 days history of distension of abdomen and right hypochondrial pain, and has history of passage of dark colored urine at nights for weeks. Passage of dark colored urine at night for weeks. On ultrasound, hepatomegaly, gross ascites, hepatic vein thrombosis are present. The lab values show a hemoglobin of 7 gram percent, WBC of 2200, platelet count of 80,000. LDH value is 600, which is elevated. Serum bilirubin is 4 milligrams, that is also elevated. The urine bile pigment test is positive. A heme dip test is also present. These are the serial urine samples taken from the patient at different times of the day. 7 o'clock in the morning shows dark colored urine, whereas 7 o'clock in the evening shows normal colored urine. What is the diagnosis? You can unmute yourself and tell me the diagnosis. I cannot see the chat. What is the diagnosis? What type of hemolytic anemia does this cause?
PNH.
Very good. PNH is the right answer. Paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria. It's an intracorpuscular acquired hemolytic anemia. Intracorpuscular, that means it's present inside the RBC, the defect. Acquired, that means it's not hereditary. It's acquired over the period of life. Hemolytic anemia. It's a hemolytic anemia. It causes hemolysis. Intracorpuscular acquired hemolytic anemia. This is the classification of hemolytic anemias which we discussed in the first few classes of hemolytic anemia. There are intracorpuscular defects and extracorpuscular factors. Intracorpuscular can be hereditary or acquired. We studied about hemoglobinopathies. We studied about enzymopathies. We studied about membranoskeletal defects. Membranoskeletal defects are thalassemia and sickle cell anemia. Hemoglobinopathies are hereditary spherocytosis and elliptocytosis. Enzymopathies are G6PD deficiency and pyruvate kinase deficiency. These are hereditary intracorpuscular defects. Whereas acquired intracorpuscular defect is PNH, paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Is my voice clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Extracorpuscular hereditary factors are just one, familial atypical hemolytic uremic syndrome. Familial atypical hemolytic uremic syndrome. Whereas extracorpuscular causes of acquired hemolytic anemia are, the first one and the most common one is mechanical destruction, which is also called microangiopathic hemolytic anemia. Microangiopathic hemolytic anemia. The other causes are toxic agents, drugs, infectious causes, and autoimmune causes. So this is the classification of hemolytic anemia. So what are the objectives for today's class? First one, what is PNH? The second one is introduction, abnormality in case of PNH, what is the pathophysiology, clinical features of PNH, the complications of PNH, laboratory findings of PNH, diagnosis and treatment of PNH. First one, what is PNH? It's an acquired chronic hemolytic anemia characterized by three things. First one, persistent intravascular hemolysis subject to recurrent exacerbations. Second one, often presenting with pancytopenia. Third one, distinct tendency to venous thrombosis. This triad makes PNH a truly unique clinical condition. So PNH is characterized by this triad: hemolysis, pancytopenia, and venous thrombosis. Next, introduction to PNH. PNH has about the same frequency in men and women. It is encountered in all populations throughout the world. It's a rare acquired disorder of red cell membrane defect arising at stem cell level. It arises at stem cell level itself. So what is the intrinsic abnormality in PNH? It's a defect in stem cell is a mutation affecting myeloid progenitor cells. That is myeloid progenitor cells, resulting in partial or complete deficiency of anchor protein, which make RBC sensitive to lytic effect of complement. These are defective in case of PNH. First one is decay accelerating factor, DAF, which is also called CD55, decay accelerating factor. The second one is membrane inhibitor of reactive lysis, MIRL, membrane inhibitor of reactive lysis, in the form of CD59. So CD55 and CD59 are the defective ones or the defective abnormalities seen in case of PNH. What is the pathophysiology? Hemolysis in PNH is mainly intravascular. It's not extravascular, it's inside the blood vessels and is due to an intrinsic abnormality of the red cell. An intrinsic abnormality which we discussed in the previous slide, which makes it exquisitively sensitive to activated complement. Now, here CD55 and CD59 are supposed to protect the RBC from the lytic effect of complement. In the absence of these two, it makes it exquisitively sensitive to activated complement. The third line, it is activated through the alternative pathway, mainly responsible for chronic hemolysis in PNH, or through an antigen antibody reaction, which explains why hemolysis can be dramatically exacerbated in the course of a viral or bacterial infection. So a patient with PNH will have infection as a trigger for extensive hemolysis. Here you can see the normal steady state. At the top left, there is an alternative pathway, a classical pathway, and a lectin pathway. The alternative pathway takes over usually, and C3 convertase along with C3b makes a complex and becomes C5 convertase. It converts C5 to C5b and it enhances the complement cascade C5, C7, C6, C7, C8, C9, leading to the formation of membrane attack complex, MAC, membrane attack complex. And the left side, you see the normal RBC with CD55 and CD59, but C3 can be attached to them in spite of having CD55 or CD59. In the next one here, intact normal CD55 and CD59 prevent the joining of membrane attack complex with the RBC. So CD59 prevents this joining of membrane attack complex with the RBC. A normal CD55, CD59 red cell can withstand the hazard of complement activation. Thus, it is protected from the lytic effect of complement system. Now, hypersusceptibility to seek or complement is due to deficiency of several protective membrane proteins, of which CD59 is the most important, because it hinders the insertion into the membrane of C9 polymers. I'll go back to the slide here. C9 polymers are leading to membrane attack complex. It prevents the attachment of C9 to CD59 here in the center of the cell. So going back to this slide, the third line, deficiency of these proteins is due to the shortage of a unique glycolipid molecule called GPI, which through a peptide bond anchors these proteins to the surface membrane of cells. So the basic abnormality in PNH is the shortage of this anchor protein called GPI, which leads to the loss of CD59 and CD55. It doesn't essentially cause the loss of CD55 and CD59. They are produced, but they're not anchored to the cell because of the loss of GPI. The last slide, shortage of GPI is in turn due to a mutation in an X-linked gene called PIGA, required for an early step in GPI biosynthesis. So GPI biosynthesis requires PIGA. This PIGA shortage in turn is due to a mutation in an X-linked gene. PIGA shortage leads to GPI shortage. GPI shortage leads to loss of 59 and CD55. Here, PNH steady state. The alternative pathway produces C5 convertase. At the left bottom corner, you can see the RBC, which does not have CD55 or CD59. The complement is attached to it. That leads to the formation of membrane attack complex. And membrane attack complex can attach to the RBC, as you can see in the center here, and it leads to MAC mediated intravascular hemolysis. The right side text here, an abnormal CD55, CD59 cell will die sooner or later by activated complement through intravascular hemolysis. Here, the membrane attack complex attaches to the RBC because there is no CD55 or 59 to protect it. Next slide, pathophysiology. Thrombosis is one of the most immediately life-threatening complications of PNH, and yet one of the least understood in its pathogenesis. It could be that deficiency of CD59 on the PNH platelet causes inappropriate platelet activation. However, other mechanisms are also possible. So the incidence of venous thrombosis in PNH is very high. Could be because of the deficiency of CD59 on PNH platelet, which causes inappropriate platelet activation, but we still do not know the exact mechanisms behind this thrombosis. The next one is PNH clinical features. Students, can you hear me? Is my voice clear? Students, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. The patient may seek medical attention because one morning she or he passed blood instead of urine. You can imagine the amount of anxiety someone would have if they see themselves peeing blood instead of urine in the morning. Being medical professionals, even we will get anxious. So normal people would immediately seek medical attention. So one of the major differential diagnoses of passing blood instead of urine, that is frank blood, is paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria. This distressing or frightening event may be regarded as a classical presentation.
So PNH can also be asymptomatic, and they can be routinely diagnosed through anemia, through investigations. But the classical presentation is the passing of blood instead of urine. It's not actually blood, it's lice blood. So here the first line, the patient often presents simply as a problem with the differential diagnosis of anemia, whether symptomatic or discovered incidentally through any investigation. Second one, sometimes the anemia is associated from the outset with neutropenia, thrombocytopenia, or both, thus signaling an element of bone marrow failure. So that means there is pancytopenia. So PNH also presents with pancytopenia. This is the PNH symptom incidence rate. 41% can present with dysphagia, 47% pulmonary hypertension, 66% dyspnea, 57% abdominal pain. Abdominal pain because of venous thrombosis or because of hepatomegaly. 64% chronic kidney disease, 47% with erectile dysfunction, 26% with hemoglobinuria, 40% with thrombosis, most commonly 88% with anemia, and 96% with fatigue and uh, work, impaired work tolerance. Next, PNH clinical features also. Some patients may present with recurrent attacks of severe abdominal pain, defying a specific diagnosis and eventually found to be related to thrombosis. When thrombosis affects the hepatic veins, it may produce acute hepatomegaly and ascites, that is a full-fledged Budd-Chiari syndrome, which in the absence of liver disease ought to raise a suspicion of PNH. So the absence of liver disease, if there is a suspected Budd-Chiari syndrome, you have to suspect PNH in that patient. Thrombosis is very common in PNH. So the next slide, the consequences of hemolysis in PNH. PNH RBCs lack a terminal complement inhibitor. The second one, complement attack happens. They are susceptible to complement attack. The third one, PNH RBC lysis and hemolysis occurs and contents are released into the surrounding plasma. There can be thrombosis in the form of venous and arterial. There can be chronic kidney disease. There can be end organ damage of the brain, GI, liver, and lung. Pulmonary hypertension causing dyspnea and cardiac dysfunction. Anemia in form of transfusions and hemosiderosis is necessary. Fatigue or impaired work tolerance, and that is abdominal pain, dysphagia, poor physical functioning, and also erectile dysfunction are the other features. What are the complications of PNH? The natural history of PNH can extend over decades. Without treatment, the median survival is estimated to be about 8 to 10 years. In the past, the most common cause of death has been venous thrombosis, but now we have anticoagulants and antiplatelet agents and also thrombolytic agents. So venous thrombosis is not the most common cause of death anymore. It was followed by infection secondary to severe neutropenia and hemorrhage secondary to severe thrombocytopenia in case of pancytopenia. Rarely, about 1 to 2% of the cases may terminate in acute myeloid leukemia. That's a serious complication of PNH. On the other hand, full spontaneous recovery from PNH has been documented, although rarely. Laboratory findings. Most consistent blood finding is anemia, which may range from mild to moderate to very severe. Usually normomacrocytic with unremarkable red cell morphology. So it's not microcytic, it's not macrocytic. Usually it's normomacrocytic with normal red cell morphology. If the MCV is high, it is due to reticulocytosis, and MCY is usually high in case of hemolytic anemia. May become microcytic if the patient is allowed to become iron deficient as a result of chronic urinary blood loss through hemoglobinuria. Unconjugated bilirubin is mildly or moderately elevated. LDH is typically markedly elevated. Values in thousands are common. Haptoglobin is usually undetectable. Hemoglobinuria may be overt in a random urine sample. Obtain serial urine samples. Hemoglobinuria can vary dramatically from day to day and even from hour to hour. That is what we saw in the second slide. There were serial urine samples. The morning 7 o'clock sample showed dark colored urine. The evening 7 o'clock sample showed normal urine color. The bone marrow is usually acellular with marked to massive erythroid hyperplasia. There will be erythroid hyperplasia, often with mild to moderate dyserythropoietic features. So they are not to be confused with myelodysplastic syndrome. Dyserythropoietic features are undifferentiated RBCs or undifferentiated precursors of RBCs. At some stage of the disease, the bone marrow may become hypocellular or even frankly aplastic. This can also happen. So how do you diagnose PNH? The definitive diagnosis of PNH must be based on the demonstration that a substantial portion of the patient's red cells have an increased susceptibility to complement due to the deficiency on their surface of proteins that normally protect the red cells from activated complement. So how do you show that the patient's red cells have an increased susceptibility to complement? The first one is sucrose hemolysis test, where the patient's serum or blood is placed in a isotonic or hypotonic solution and hemolysis is checked after a certain time. It can be unreliable. In contrast, the esterified serum or HAM test is highly reliable but is only carried out in a few labs. Here the serum is esterified and at 56 degrees centigrade it is heated. If it is 56 degrees centigrade, the complement is usually destroyed at that stage. So both the controlled blood and PNH infected blood, both will not have any sort of hemolysis. Whereas the acidified serum HAM test is positive in case of hemolysis, in case of PNH. That means there will be hemolysis. The blood will not be in the same color. The gold standard today is flow cytometry. So flow cytometry, which can be carried out on granulocytes as well as on red cells. A bimodal distribution of cells with a discrete population that is CD59 and CD55 negative is diagnostic of PNH. So a bimodal distribution of cells are seen. A few of the cells are normal, few of the cells are abnormal. So how do you treat PNH? Most patients receive supportive treatment only, including transfusion of filtered red cells whenever necessary, which for some patients means quite frequently. Folic acid supplements are mandatory. Serum iron should be checked periodically, and iron supplements should be administered as appropriate. Long-term glucocorticoids are not indicated because there is no evidence that they have any effect on chronic hemolysis. So long-term glucocorticoids are not indicated. PNH treatment. A major advance in the management of PNH has been eculizumab. Eculizumab. The only form of treatment that currently can provide a definitive cure for PNH is allogenic BMT, bone marrow transplant. Patients with PNH AA, that means what is AA? Aplastic anemia. Patients with PNH aplastic anemia, immunosuppressive treatment with anti-thymocyte globulin and cyclosporin A may be indicated. Any patient who has had venous thrombosis should be on regular anticoagulant prophylaxis. If the patient does not recover on anticoagulant prophylaxis, you can give thrombolytic agents like TPA. Eculizumab and PNH. Eculizumab is a humanized monoclonal antibody. It binds to the complement component C5 near the site that, when cleaved, will trigger the distal part of the complement cascade, leading to the formation of membrane attack complex. So what does eculizumab do here? Eculizumab prevents the attachment of membrane attack complex near the site where complement C5 is attached. So it will prevent the complement cascade from happening and the formation of MAC from happening. So C5 is stopped there itself. Third line, eculizumab by abrogating complement-dependent intravascular hemolysis significantly improves the quality of life of PNH patients. Need for red blood transfusion would also be abrogated. Indeed, this is the case in about one half of the patients with with eculizumab, in many of whom there is a rise in hemoglobin levels also. In the remaining patients, however, the anemia remains sufficiently severe to require blood transfusion. So this slide here, you can see PNH on eculizumab. Just like the previous slide, there is an alternative pathway. There is a C3 convertase. The C3 becomes C3b. C3b along with C3 convertase becomes C5 convertase. Now C5 convertase cannot act on C5 to produce C5b, which will further progress the complement cascade, because eculizumab acts as the acts on C5. It attaches to the C5. So with C5 blocked, on the right side, you can read the text there. With C5 blocked, a PNH red cell will be protected from undergoing intravascular hemolysis. But once opsonized by C3, it will become prey to macrophages. So extravascular hemolysis cannot be prevented here. Extravascular hemolysis cannot be prevented here. There is a opsonization with C3, and there is a extravascular hemolysis because of the macrophages that ingest the red blood cell. So intravascular hemolysis is prevented, but extravascular hemolysis is not prevented. Once the distal complement pathway is blocked, red cells no longer destroyed by the MAC become opsonized by complement C3 fragments and undergo extravascular hemolysis. So based on its half-life, eculizumab must be administered intravenously every 14 days. The availability of eculizumab has decreased significantly the proportion of patients receiving bone marrow transplant. So eculizumab has revolutionized the treatment of PNH. And that is the end of today's class. Thank you for your patience. If you have any doubts, you can ask me through the mic. If there are no doubts, you can tell me that there are no doubts and we can end this class.
No, sir.
Okay, good. No doubts. Then that's the end of today's class. Thank you.